My name is Clara Bennett. And I never expected the quietest moments of my life to be the ones that changed everything. I married Daniel Morrison 5 years ago. He was charming in all the right ways, well-dressed, articulate, successful. Everyone thought I had hit the jackpot. But behind closed doors, Daniel was emotionally cold, distant, and often dismissive of anything that didn't directly benefit him. Love, in his world, was transactional. If you didn't serve a purpose, you didn't belong. I tried to make it work. I convinced myself that his walls would eventually come down. That underneath all that indifference was a man capable of warmth and loyalty. But that illusion shattered completely the day his father, Frank, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Frank wasn't just a man with regrets, he was a man forgotten. Daniel refused to care for him. I didn't sign up to play nursemaid, he said, barely looking up from his phone. That was it. No empathy, no hesitation, just rejection. But I couldn't walk away like that. I couldn't let Frank die alone. So I brought him into our home. At first, he was silent, tired, and stubborn. We didn't talk much. He didn't ask for anything. But he watched, quietly, studying me the way someone observes a flickering candle, unsure if it will hold or go out. I began reading to him on Tuesday afternoons. Just small things. A few chapters from the detective novels he loved. Sometimes I'd bring him tea and sit outside with him in the garden. Over time, he opened up. He started telling me stories, about his wife, about Daniel as a boy, about the dreams he used to have. He smiled more, laughed at his own jokes. And something in him softened. Something in me did too. We never talked about death. Not directly, but we both knew it lingered nearby. And still, each week, we met it with peace. With ritual. With the simple act of showing up. On a quiet Thursday morning, Frank passed away. Peacefully, his hand wrapped in mine. I remember sitting with him for hours, even after the nurse came and the room grew colder. It didn't feel right to leave him alone. He had been so much more than Daniel's father. He had become family. 2 days later, I was called to the office of Frank's lawyer, Mr. Henderson. I thought it was just routine, maybe some documents or details about the funeral. But instead, Mr. Henderson handed me a letter. Frank's handwriting was neat and strong, though the words trembled with quiet emotion. Greater than Clara, I've rewritten my will. I'm leaving you my house, my savings, and a few other things you'll discover in time. Not because you asked for them, but because you earned them. You gave me back my dignity. You gave me peace. You gave me something my own son never could, presence. If Daniel claims you manipulated me, ignore him. He's been lost in his own reflection for too long. This is not charity. This is justice. This is love. You are the daughter I never had. Take care of the house. Make it yours. Fill it with light and laughter. I see you, Clara. I always did. With love and deep gratitude, Frank. I sat in silence, tears slipping down my cheeks. No one had ever seen me like that before. Not even Daniel. But that wasn't the only surprise Frank had left behind. Mr. Henderson handed me a second envelope, this one containing a key and another short letter. Greater than there's a safety deposit box at First National Bank. This key will open it. What's inside is yours. Just don't forget to breathe when you see it. Curious and slightly overwhelmed, I went the next day. Inside the box was a stack of photos, Frank fishing at a lake, his wife smiling in the sunshine, a small log cabin in the background. There were old coins, a few heirloom rings, and, most significantly, a property deed. Frank owned a cabin deep in the mountains, by a serene lake surrounded by pine trees. He never told Daniel, never told anyone, but he left it for me. A month later, I filed for divorce. Daniel didn't even protest. He'd already moved out and started seeing someone new, someone more, on his level, as he phrased it in a drunken voicemail. He only reacted when he realized Frank had left everything to me. He contested the will, accusing me of manipulation, emotional coercion, and even forging documents. But Frank had prepared well. Every page was notarized, every signature verified. Even his longtime friend and therapist testified that Frank had never been more mentally sound in those final months. In court, Daniel's rage barely masked his humiliation. Greater than, she turned my own father against me, he shouted. No, the judge replied firmly. You did that all by yourself. I kept the house, and I visited the cabin often. It became my sanctuary. There, I found peace I hadn't known I needed. Bill and Margaret Thompson, the elderly couple next door, welcomed me warmly. They told me how Frank used to visit every summer, how he'd sketch the lake, talk about family, and sometimes just sit in silence by the fire. He always hoped someone worthy would inherit this place, Margaret told me. Looks like he got his wish. Back in town, I started volunteering at a hospice center. There, I met Dorothy, a sharp, witty woman in her 80s with failing lungs and a fierce sense of humor. She reminded me of Frank in so many ways. I read to her, painted her nails, sat beside her when her breathing became shallow. Before she passed, she gave me a box of her favorite books and whispered, "Thank you for showing up when no one else would." Her grandson, who hadn't visited her in months, tried to contest the will too. But once again, truth prevailed. The nurses testified. My actions spoke louder than his accusations ever could. About a year later, I received a letter from Daniel. He had been caught trying to forge one of Frank's old wills, hoping to reverse the inheritance. He was sentenced to community service and therapy. And somewhere in that process, something shifted in him. Greater than Clara, you don't owe me anything. But I owe you the truth. I was cruel, jealous, blind. You loved my father when I couldn't. And for that, I hated you. But I see now, kindness isn't manipulation. It's courage. It's strength. And you had it all along. I hope you're happy. You earned it. Daniel. I didn't respond. Some chapters need to remain closed. I wrote a memoir called Tuesday Afternoons. It wasn't a bestseller, but it touched hearts. It told the story of how one man's quiet gratitude changed my life. How love, when offered freely, creates legacies that outlast even death. On the second anniversary of Frank's passing, I hosted a small gathering in the garden. Emily, the hospice nurse, came with her daughters. The Thompsons brought blueberry pie. Mr. Henderson read aloud from Frank's favorite mystery novel. Daniel didn't come, but he sent roses. And a final note. Greater than, thank you for giving my father the ending he deserved. I'm still learning how to be someone who shows up. I hope one day, I get there. That night, I sat in the rocking chair Frank had started carving and I had finished with my own hands. The garden was quiet. The stars blinked above. The wind stirred the roses. And I realized, Frank hadn't just left me houses or cabins or money. He had left me something far more rare. A legacy of love. One rooted not in blood, but in presence. In loyalty. In kindness given with no expectation of return. Every Tuesday afternoon, I still sit by the window and read. Sometimes, I imagine Frank is listening. And sometimes, I swear I hear him laugh. Because in this world full of noise and cruelty and shallow love, we forget that the most valuable things in life aren't inherited. They're earned. Through the quiet, revolutionary act of showing up when it matters most.